eating little crackers, we're drinking
We eat a lot
water,
of cashews. It's silly because they're fatty and they help to coat your mouth. And whenever people ask me what pairs well, I say all of our wines pair perfectly with cashews, which is really by design, but the fact is that's what we seem to eat. And we have to take a lot of breaks. You know, we'll take a few minutes and then, you know, we might taste 10 or 15 wines and then we'll go take a little walk in the vineyard, or I don't know. I mean, we take short breaks because we want to stay focused and we don't want to lose track of what we're doing. But you have to take some breaks or you just really lose the thread. And yeah, like you were talking about contests and stuff, like otherwise just the huge wines all seem good and the wines that are really going to go well in a blend, you lose them, and that's not what we want to do.
So there's a question about, you know, are there any rules about blending? In other words, things that don't get blended together. And the answer is definitely not. We will just make whatever wines we think are the best. And that extends to things like we make non-vintage wines like Slate and Feldspar because we're happy to blend year to year. If it makes a better wine, we just put a number on it instead of a vintage. If the Passeggiata every year has some white wine in it. We're happy to blend whites with reds. We'll do whatever it is to try to get a wine that we think hits the spot we're looking for. So and that we got to give Lucien a lot of credit for that. He despite being French, he has he doesn't care. He's like, whatever makes the best wine, I don't care. I'll blend anything.
Just want to footnote on the despite being French says nothing about French people. It's just that the rules in France are extremely, so wine in France, again, this could be another whole topic, but winemaking and growing in France is incredibly regulated. So if you are in Bordeaux, you may only grow the Bordeaux grapes. You cannot even grow anything else if you don't want to blend it. You can't only grow these grapes, and you can you are told the first day that you may harvest and the last day that you must be finished with. You are told what your minimum and maximum yields can be in the vineyard. Like, it's all crazy regulated. So you're
told how many buds you can leave at pruning, how many vines you can plant per acre. There's almost no choice, which is fascinating. And you know, so you get to Burgundy or something, and there's not a lot of creativity. I mean, there's still some, but in how you can grow.
Yeah, the barrels and there are other things that work more into it. But so I think one of the reasons that he was first interested in working with us and willing to work with this like random little winery in Maryland, you know, was that's kind of like we could do whatever we want. You know, we were talking about the trivia. See who paid attention last week. The trivia that our first Syrah was 10% Pinot, and our most recent Pinot is 10% Syrah. And if you were a French person, like your head would pop off to hear that, because it's just like, whoa, you know, it's just totally breaking all the rules. They're grown in different regions. Those vines should never see each other. But because we don't have those constraints here, we can do a lot more. So I think it makes it kind of fun. It does mean that we have that many more potential combinations when we go sit down to blend. But yeah.
Well, I'm going to pause for a second and talk about these wines, because I don't want to forget to talk about the two wines while we're here. And it's a good segue right now, because one of the harder things we do at blending is we have these 5 Bordeaux varieties. We usually make the Passeggiata first. That's a whole separate blending challenge. And once in a while it's easy, but most of the time it's difficult, because Passeggiata is, we have such a sense of what it should be, and it's hard to get it there every vintage with the variation in our climate. But then we move on to the reds and the Bordeaux reds, and what we're trying to do is blend to a standard, I guess, for Rolling Hills, for Crumbling Rock, and for Estate. If we can leave Slate and Feldspar aside for a minute, because we make those when we can, but otherwise we're trying to blend to a standard for those 3 wines, and we take the basic philosophy of if we can make a Crumbling Rock, that's great, but if that means our Rolling Hills is not good enough, we have to start robbing the Crumbling Rock to make the Rolling Hills better. Rolling Hills sort of drives our whole blending strategy, if you will, of that. And there are years where we do not make Crumbling Rock or Estate or anything above that, because all of the best lots need to go into Rolling Hills in order to make it up to our standard. Now, our standard is about length, it's about mouthfeel, it's about concentration. It's not about flavors and aromas, which is why you notice that some years Rolling Hills might be 80% Merlot, and the next year it's 60% Cabernet Franc, and the next year it's 48% Cabernet Sauvignon, and a bunch of other things. We're not really not looking for a flavor. We're looking for good flavors and good aromas and good intensity of both those things, but we're much more attuned to what does this wine feel like, and how does it behave on the palate. And so these two wines we've got in front of us, the 12 and the 2012s, I think it's a really good example of this.
Do you have that from there?
You have the Rolling Hills, yeah, and I have the big glass Rolling Hills. Rolling Hills 12 has still got a really nice nose. It's got some wonderful flavors to it. I've tasted the Crumbling Rock 12, so I'm going to compare that to the Rolling Hills. It's a really nice wine. It'd be wonderful when we have it with dinner, I think, because it's got a great freshness to it. The tannins have calmed down really nicely, and it's gotten very smooth. But it's not as concentrated or as long as the Crumbling Rock, and it's not going to be as long-lived. I think this is about where I would drink this wine, the 2012 right now. Rolling Hills. Sarah's saying it's better in the small glass.
I think it's better in the smaller glass. It's interesting. So you know our obsession with the wine glasses. So this is like the more normal glass, and this is like the super fancy glass. And I just tried in glass to glass. So you can try. But I think that this wine, it's probably because it is a slightly smaller wine in terms of intensity and tannin and everything else. I think the little glass is showing it better than the bigger glass. See, go figure.
Go figure.
There you go. So I didn't mean to interrupt you, but
yeah.
I was
So
into that.
we hit our blending targets on this. The Rolling Hills, really nice wine. I think it's about peaked right now, and I would drink it if any of you still have 2012 Rolling Hills. But I'm not saying it's going to get a whole lot worse the next couple of years. It shows no signs of going downhill, but it feels to me like it's about where it's going to get in terms of peak. The Crumbling Rock is drinking beautifully right now. There's wonderful fruit, and this is a classic European sort of Bordeaux style wine to me. It's not a big fruit bomb like California, even though it has some nice fruit. Here, I'll pour some for Sarah while I'm talking. And here, and
this is it in here, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks.
Try that.
Where's my glass?
And
Gotta get my glass. Sorry, it's off here.
And but it's got wonderful elegance, wonderful finesse. I'm dying to go.
We're not very good at it. I don't even know what that picture was. Sorry. Sorry.
Sharing too much on
I know. Sorry. We don't have our
no.
Whatever. Moving on. We don't quite have all the logistics down yet.
So really, and yeah, this wine, wonderful on the dinner table, and got a lot of life left in it. I'm really happy with the way this wine turned out. So, and so much more complexity, and I think than the Rolling Hills even right now. Really, really nice. So good. So did our blending job well in 2012.
Yes, go us. Yeah.
So,
guess what? We like it.
So,
good thing our kids are going to make fun of us talking about our better wine.
Crumbling Hills versus Rolling Hills.
Crumbling
Hills
versus Rolling Rock.
Every customers do that.
Exactly.
Rolling Hills versus Crumbling Rock. Crumbling Rock's going to be longer on the finish. It's going to be smoother. It's going to last longer. It's going to have more concentration to it. Rolling Hills is, when young, often better. We often have people who prefer the Rolling Hills at the tasting bar because it's meant to be a little bit better drinking earlier, and it's usually has a little more of I don't know if exuberance is the right word, but vivacity or something when it's young. Their Crumbling Rocks tend to be a little restrained, but over time, boy, do they open up. So it's great.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to keep going through the questions that we keep getting. So challenges that tend to come up. This is one of my favorites. So I will tell you every year since the very first year when we did this, when we taste the wine the first time through, except for probably 19, I will not. every year except for 19, when I taste the wines, every single one is terrible. I taste them all. I'm like, oh my God, this one's awful. This is, and I think it's just like, I'm a little paranoid. I've been a little nervous about the project from day one. And I taste them and I'm like, oh, this is it. This is the year that it's all gone. We blew it. And then somehow, as we keep going and we keep tasting and we start putting them together, they always come together. And I should know by now, and I have actually gotten a little more confidence by now, that it's just the process. But I think it's because I'm like a little stressed about it, and they better be good, and it's the blends, and I know the first few years, especially when we first tasted with Lucien, I had no idea what we were doing or what to expect, and it was kind of different for the industry in a whole new world. And I'm going to pick on the French people again, but not in a bad. But so Lucien is very calm and he's very reserved, and his English is beautiful and basically perfect. But he has a lot of little Frenchisms that come out. So my favorite is, as we're going through, like the highest praise you're ever going to get is, "Oh, that's fine." Well, like, we're American, and like, that's fine. Is like, that's not what we're going through. That's fine. Or, this begins to be acceptable. Like, begins to be acceptable? Are you kidding me? Like, we went to all this to begin to be acceptable. So, but what I've learned over, 12, 15 years of working with him is, when we said this is the standard of wine we want to make, and when we get to begins to be acceptable, it means we're hitting that benchmark. But like, if we were American, we'd be like, this is fantastic. Look at how great it was. No, begins to be acceptable. So that is part of my paranoia, I think, in the beginning. So we're like, this wine begins to be acceptable. And you're like, oh God, how are we going to make anything good out of that? Anyway, so that to me is like, we always have this roller coaster. That's probably more of an insight into my mental stability than into anything about blending. But I do think like each wine individually is often a little strange. And then as you start to put them together, and as we start to talk through the Lucienisms, we begin to get, we have more confidence in our own tasting, I think, or I will say for myself, I do. And we're able to kind of weed through that, like what the process is going to be like, and realize, as you put it together, it's going to be better. So that to me is like the biggest challenge that always comes up, is my own, like, oh my God, I'm sure it's the end.
Yeah, and Sarah, she's right. There's a rhythm to the usual 3 days of blending, right, which is we go in with high hopes. They get crushed by the end of day one. Always, doesn't matter how good the wine is or not, somehow. And then by day 3, we walk away saying, "Oh yes, we pulled it up." And yeah, I don't know why that is, even though we know it's coming. It's just the way it is.
I will say though, 19, they're always really good. Maybe it's just because I always complain about aging, but it was just so, they were all really good. It was so easy to go through them all.
You just set us up for having way too high expectations, and then they're going to
That's true, because they're all still young. We'll see. This is my favorite question. We get this all the time. Are there heated arguments or discussions when everybody wants us to be coming to blows over the wine? People ask all the time. We have plenty of heated arguments and discussions, but usually not at the blending table. We're on our good behavior. No, it is funny. It is rare that we have a huge difference of opinion on the wine. There are times when one or the other of us have kind of advocated a style or advocated a blend, and I don't know if it's partly because we just have similar tastes, or everybody is pretty just like on their good behavior about it all. I don't know, but usually the most is we'll be like, I kind of lean towards that one, and you lean towards that one, and it's never, there's not a lot of drama around the blending, except for the nervous breakdown, but we keep that quiet. Nobody knows what's going on until afterwards. And once in a while now, like once in a while, Lucien will do something else, say, that is fantastic. And then I'll be like, and we're like whispering over his head. Like, superb. Like once in a while you get a real superlative. Yes.
Like trying to please your favorite teacher.
Yeah, I know, it's so silly. It's so silly. We're like, woo! Anyway.
The other thing, and the other reason that we will always have him, if he'll have us, is in this business, it's really easy to get what's called a cellar palate, where you drink your wines, you love your wines, they become like your kids. You don't see their faults, and you just think they're wonderful. And what you need is somebody to come in and say, what in the world did you do with this wine? Because you really messed this up. You need somebody who's willing to come in with an honest opinion, and he's very good at that. He won't say it as directly as I just did, because he's French, but in that way. But we now know when he subtly says about some wine that we need to go back and look at our notes and find out why it didn't turn out the way it did.
Right, just he's subtle on the praise, he's a little subtle on the criticism too. But he'll say, something's wrong with this. We need to figure that out. I see a question here, which is, are all of your wines blended? And I know people are so frustrated because they want a varietal. Make this into a varietal. We'll never say that we will never do anything, because you never know, we do like to play around, but pretty much everything ends up blended. And it's only because we will, yes, we will taste a Cabernet Sauvignon or a Merlot and say, you know what, we could bottle this like that. It would be perfectly good. This could be a varietal. And that does come up once in a while, even in my paranoid panic day. But generally, we go and we throw a little something else in it and it gets better. So have we made, yes, often the Albarino, honestly, comes out of the tank. We taste it. We're like, yep, good, bottle it, done. There are some, the whites more often don't have any blending.
Albarino, easiest wine.
So easy, yeah. Rarely do we do anything to it. Gruner sometimes is that way, where it's just great the way it is. Maybe it needs a little bit, the whites are pretty easy. The Syrahs, sometimes we'll end up with everything together. It'll be 100% Syrah, but usually we are blending we will be playing with the balance of the different clones or the different blocks in terms of that.
And to be honest, we would blend the Syrah if we had Grenache, if we had Mourvedre, if we had other wines. We probably will try those things. We're a little nervous to try them because of they're a little more winter tender, and they tend to be more dry climate grapes than Syrah does. So we will try them at some point, because we would love to have some options to blend with Syrah, but it doesn't always play nicely with Merlot and the Cabs. So.
Yeah, it's a little tricky. Yeah. You might see a little bit in sometimes. Yeah. One of the questions we get a lot is, how come you have 1% in this? Are you guys just kidding? And there are kind of two answers to that. The most common answer of how we end up with 1% in a barrel is that we will have. It's very important that we store the barrels totally full. So sometimes there will be a barrel that is a mix of wines. So usually, Cabernet Sauvignon barrels, only Cabernet Sauvignon, and then only Cabernet Franc in one barrel. But sometimes at the end, we have little bits left over. And so we will have, 2 or 3 things in the same barrel. And then if we take that barrel and it goes into a wine and it's one of 30 barrels or something in that wine, by the time you pair out all those little bits, you end up with a tiny percentage. So sometimes it's like that. It's not like we literally added 1% and then suddenly it was better. Although, to be fair, sometimes it is. We'll add a tiny little bit of something, and it will tip the balance. Usually that, I will say, usually that balance situation is like if we're worried about the acidity of the wine, it'll be that we add something that's quite on the high, or maybe the tannin structure, sometimes it's that too. We'll add something that's pretty far down that path, and a tiny bit will make a big difference. And we will have, I won't say arguments, but back and forth at the blending table where we have 1, 2, and 3% of something changing in the blend, and we'll taste them back and forth and switch them around, and then we'll be deciding between those. So those teeny little percentages are, sometimes they're kind of an accident of which barrel it was, and then sometimes they are like, yeah, it really made a little tiny bit, made a little difference. Yeah. Not to say every single 1% that went into the barrel was that precise, but sometimes at the end they are.
Just 2 minutes on white wine blending, because we've talked a lot about red wine blending.
Yeah,
we make our Bedlam. Our Bedlam is actually not blended wine. It's co-fermented, which means we blend the juices at harvest, and we ferment them together. So by the time it gets to the blending table, it's already 99% made, like the other white wines. So the thing we often do with our whites is, and many winemakers around the world struggle, that it's so important in a white to get the balance of acidity right in the wine. And it's extremely hard to pick it at the right time and know how it's going to behave during fermentation and things. And especially in the hotter climates, you get too little acidity when the grapes are finally ripe and the acid burns off. So they end up adding acid to the wines. It's usually a tartaric acid from a bag, so it's it's crystals and things added to the wine.
Cream of tartar.
Yeah, kind of thing. And so that's a very common thing around the wine world. We don't do that. We do something different, which is when we're reducing our crop, usually the vines set too many grapes so that we think they won't be able to ripen all of those grapes. So we cut a percentage of them off in around the beginning of August to reduce it down to the crop load we want that we think the vines can ripen. We have taken the last, 6-7 years, have decided to, instead of just dropping those unripe green little hard berries on the ground, we pick them, we bring them in, we press them. You have to press them really hard to get any juice out of them, but you get a little bit of juice. There's not much sugar in it. And we ferment it, and we make, as maybe some of you have seen, our little tiny half bottles that you can buy called sour grapes. And it's literally the juice of unripe little green grapes. And for the chemists out there, our white wines usually we like the pH to be around 3.2, 3.3, maybe 3.4, somewhere in there, 3.4. The pH of the unripe grapes when we pick that juice is around 2.6, which on a logarithmic scale means it's something like 8 times as much acidity in that stuff. So a little tiny bit, if we've let the grapes get a little too ripe and then the balance is off, they're a little bit flat, you would put a little 1%, 2% of this verjus, or as the French would call it, or sour grapes, as we said, in there. You can dial at the blending table exactly back to the balance you want. And you not only do not have to add acid from a bag somewhere, but the acid is not great. A really good taster can usually taste it, and it doesn't replace the acids in the wine one-to-one. It sticks out. You can feel it on the finish. It's not great. So we make a bunch of this verjus, and if anybody wants to, usually we have some for sale, and it's essentially like lemon juice, except very different flavor profile. It's very, very sour, and we use it at home exclusively for cooking and things. It's a lot of fun.
You use it where you would use vinegar or where you would use citrus juice usually. But it works great. It works great for this because it has a great profile already.
And so for instance, some of you see sometimes they make a Viognier with 2% Syrah in it.
Oh yeah,
that Syrah is verjus of Syrah.
It's still Syrah, right?
It's still Syrah, but it's picked green. It has almost no red flavor at all.
Right.
It's just like almost pure acid. But the Viognier is one that often tends to lose its acidity as it gets ripe and become a little bit flat. So we like to put a little verjus in it. So.
On the other hand, sometimes you'll see a Syrah with a little bit of Viognier in it, and that is actual Viognier. It is kind of a weirdism of Syrah that if you ferment it with a little bit of Viognier, especially Viognier skins, it helps to what is the right word? Stabilize the color in Syrah. So that's kind of a thing, and that is the chemists out there, I have no idea why. I don't understand the chemistry of it at all, but it is a thing. We have done it. So I think some of the old Syrahs, you'll look back, you'll see a little tiny bit of Viognier. They don't ripen at exactly the same time, so it's a little tricky, but we have figured it out sometimes. Yeah. That reminds me, there's a question about the leaf stone 15. Why is it 100% Syrah? The leaf stones are almost always 100% Syrah. Maybe they'll have a little bit of other things in the blend, but generally leaf stone is sort of like the crumbling rock to the rolling. The leaf stone is to Syrah like the crumbling rock is to the rolling hills, usually in our blending. In fact, the very first couple of leaf stones were called leaf stone Syrah. And then I don't know why, we just decided we didn't need that much. It got complicated. So that's pretty typical of that.
Yep. And when we get it right and have a good year, Syrah is a very complete grape. It doesn't need a lot of blending.
Yeah.
The Bordeaux varieties pretty much always do, even as good as they are.
Yeah. Right. Again, the Syrah blending tends to be how are we going to split them between leaf stone and regular, and that's a barrel selection. And again, how we're going to pull the component parts to make sure that the Syrah is still really good, and we can still make a leaf stone. And like the crumbling rock and the rolling hills, there are plenty of years when we'll only make one or the other because that's just what the grapes gave us. What the wines gave us. So
okay, great. We should talk about next week.
Yeah, so we're not as rushed as I thought because we could go till 6:30. You guys are never going to get to go. I'm just trying to make sure. Yeah, I thought we had to be hard stop at 5:45, but we do have a little longer with Zoom than I thought. So I see a question about Passeggiata. So Passeggiata is kind of a story unto itself. People ask all the time, how come it doesn't have the blend on the back, and why is it so different, and how did you get to Passeggiata? So I think if people aren't desperate to leave yet, I'll talk about Passeggiata first. So I know our house is slowly filling with smoke. I think Ed's cooking a chicken in the other room. Anyway, sorry, I know it's fine, but he's gonna go figure that out. So the Passeggiata. So we are big dry rosé fans. Both of us love to drink rosé, and we tried the first couple years to make rosé. And the secret to making a good rosé is to pick the fruit while there's still a lot of acidity in the grapes. A good rosé is very crisp, very acidic, and then still has some of those kind of red wine flavors going on. So the first couple of years that we tried to make rosé, we made them, but we made them in what is a typical way of making rosé, which is by what's called bleeding. So we pick the red grapes, we drain a little bit of juice off right away, and that juice is called the bleed. I don't know why they picked that name because it's kind of creepy, but that's it. So almost all rosé is made that way and then acidified back, like what I was describing before. When we made our first rosés, we did that. We got the grapes ripe to the red wine ripeness levels, which is going to have much less acid than you're going to want for a rosé. And then when we made the rosé out of them, they were like a little flat. They were just like kind of a little flabby. And we hadn't discovered the idea of verjus. We hadn't made that yet the first few years. And so we didn't like the idea of adding tartaric back because as we said, we feel like it kind of sticks out of the wine when you do it. It just doesn't work well. So we kind of had this rosé that was sort of, And so we sat at the blending table and we played with it because even a wine that's not great, we work with it to see if there's anything we can do. So when we started to mix it with a little bit of red, we found that what we came up with was a wine that was very light, not tannic, but had kind of a lot of interest and a lot of flavor. So that was the first Passeggiata. And to our minds, it's kind of halfway between a rosé and a table wine. And it's just, what's nice about it is that it's very smooth, it's very approachable, it's kind of an easygoing wine. We find when we have customers who come in and are, dragged along by a husband or wife or friend or whatever, they're like, I don't like wine, or I only drink sweet wine, or I only drink white wine, mostly we say, okay, fine, just try this one. And we pretty much, not insist, but suggest, I'll just try the Passeggiata, because a lot of people who don't like big, heavy, tannic reds will like it because it has a lot of flavor and a lot of interest, but it has almost no tannin. It ends up being very smooth. So for us to find that balance, it is funny. It is, at the blending table, it's the hardest wine to blend because it's easy to make a very simple wine and it's easy to make a very flavorful and tannic wine. But to find one that has enough interest to be enjoyable, but isn't starting to get too far down the red wine scale is kind of tricky. So it's kind of crazy, but we'll often spend way more time blending Passeggiata than say Crumbling Rock, because the Crumbling Rock or the estate, it's like you take all the good stuff, you put it together. Not quite. It's not quite that simple, but almost, because all of the components go together well. You want the big, rich, concentrated tannic wines, you put them all together, you have a great wine. The Passeggiata, you got to get all these mixes. So it's kind of funny. It's sort of much more work to make, but we feel like it should just be, you shouldn't have to think too much about it. So that's why it has its own label and the little story about the walk. And, it's just kind of a wine to relax with. Not that all wine isn't to relax with, but, in some ways it's like, just don't think too much about it. Oh, we make all these wines to think about and focus on and balance and texture and all. And this should just be kind of fun. So that's kind of the backstory of Passeggiata. Yeah. It's kind of my favorite. When people ask what your favorite is, you don't have to worry too much about it. They're all my favorite. Okay. So does that cover our list of official questions? All right. So text us fast, Zoe, if we missed anything huge. I'm trying to read. 16 Crumbling Rock. I do see it. Do you think 16 Crumbling Rock should be near its prime?
Nope.
I think it's tasting great now, but there is no rush. I think it'll be getting better and better and better. Yeah.
That's a wonderful wine. It's gonna last a long time.
So
yeah, of course, drink it now because it's gonna be wonderful now, but it's gonna be wonderful 10, 15 years from now also.
And what about a 2012, a recent year that you would compare 2012
I've been
to?
racking my brain
I know,
over that question. The most similar year we've had to 12 was 8.
Yeah.
But since then, haven't had a year like that. Yeah. 15
yeah.
is a little, no, I can't really think of one. I would take another 12 year.
That was a nice year.
It's a nice year, but I don't think 8 was kind of similar and 6 was kind of similar. But since then, we haven't had a year like that. So.
Okay. All right. I think, again, we'll keep an eye out for more questions. I'm going to talk Curling Rock 06 and 08. Should be holding or drinking? You have a Curling Rock 06. You should be dropping it off on our front doorstep. The 06s, we are still, I'll do that. Yeah. The 06s, we are still, we have not, I mean, Ed and I haven't tasted one in a long time, but people are still drinking them and they're still tasting great. I think maybe it's been a year since we've opened an 06. The 08, I would say, you probably want to drink sooner. I think the 08s, I drink the 08 and I would hang on to the 06. I mean, I would say drink them all, but I would say the 06 is going to outlast the 08 for sure.
When is the 19 Passeggiata?
I know.
Send that question to Melissa. Hey, Melissa.
Wait, do we have any? When is the night? What is the question?
When is the
it's bottled. Oh, I forgot I was going to lord it over people. I brought it. We bottled it the week before last. It's bottled. We'll have to open it soon and just see how it's going. Usually when you bottle, you need a little time to let the wine kind of simmer back down. And we haven't opened it yet since we bottled it, but soon, pretty soon. I
would guess a month. But
yeah, something like that.
What legal plans Mel has for that? So.
That's great. Let's see. So on to my logistics part of the program. Did I miss something else? Well, you can pop in. You can pop in with more question. First of all, I want to just say a big thank you to everybody who has been ordering wine and coming out and picking up. And especially, I want to just forward a thank you from this week. It was the cheese vendors and the pizza guys who we sold, I think, just under 200 pizzas. That was 170 pizzas. And they were so appreciative and like, oh, it was so great. You sent this to your customers, but you guys all went and bought them all. Like, it's fantastic. And the cheese people, you were there when Colleen from Shepherd's Manor came, and she was just so appreciative. And we sold we placed a huge order of their cheese, and then you guys bought almost all of it. So we'll be ordering more, and that's great. I mean, we are delighted with that. So thank you to all of you for that. I got in a little trouble with my children because the cupcakes were gone before I figured I'll just get the leftovers. There were no leftovers, so I'm going to be the first one ordering the cupcakes before they get put on the website. There are going to be cupcakes again available next week. And I'm going to get in there so that I can, because we're making our kids work every weekend, and I promised cupcakes and I failed on that one. So anyway, but thank you to everybody. We are dealing with the vendors, so we're getting all the appreciation from them, but it really has been, they've been super appreciative, and it's, we can only eat so much cheese. So it's really gone to all of you. So thank you for that. Next week's special whatever local event is, we are having a food truck. We don't have all the details of the logistics worked out. It's 2 bold chefs, and there will be some kind of pre-order. It will be just to pick up because, of course, we cannot allow people to come hang out and eat there. You'll have to look for your email for the details on that. But it's coming the following week. So we have come up with, and tonight here's some visual. This is for 2 weeks. So this isn't next week, but this is the salad. It doesn't look so good in my video. Here's crab cakes. This is really good. I snuck some the other day. Ta-da-da. I don't know how well the thing, I don't want to flip it over. But so not next Saturday, but the following Saturday, which is April 28th, we do have we have hooked up with Nick's Fish House in Baltimore, who is one of our customers and a friend of ours owns that place. And we were super excited to work with them because one of the, I guess, the segments of the industries that's suffering a lot in this whole shutdown is the crab market in Maryland, or the crab fishermen. I'm on the board of a bank that does agricultural and forestry and natural resources work in Maryland. And I was just on a call last week, and they said, two of the hardest hit industries in our area are dairy, which we're working on as well as we can, and oysters and crabs and stuff, because so much of that food is usually eaten in restaurants. And like a crab feast, I mean, really, there's no crab involved. It's like hang out with your friends and then you get a little crab. So a lot of that's not going on. And so there's getting to be a backlog of that. So we were super excited to work with these guys. They've put together a menu that conveniently goes very well with our Albarino. So it was designed around the 2018 Albarino. I think it will pair fine with the Gruner as well. I think it also tastes good with lots of other things, but those were what we were thinking. And those, again, it won't be for this Saturday, but the following Saturday. And we're excited because there's a lot of crab in those crab cakes. So it's a couple crab cakes, and then it's like this like cheesy scallop potato kind of thing, and asparagus, and then a salad, and then a huge chunk of chocolate cake. Anyway, I don't know how well it shows. So I was like, if you get me one early, I will eat it on camera. So I guess I'll spare you eating it on camera. But all that's coming. So I hope we're not inundating everybody's emails. I know when people sign up for email, I swear, I'm like, I promise we'll send you one email a month. It won't be much, but we're breaking all our own rules on this and trying to send an email out at least once a week so we can kind of keep all these like local, do these little supports for the local businesses and keep things going. So keep an eye out for that. And we'll have more details up on the website and in email, and I know Facebook and whatever else. Oh, and the last thing I'm supposed to talk about is what should we do next week? So I had originally thought we would chuck white wines next week and do the crab cake pairing, but I had my schedule wrong. So we have two ideas, and we thought we would throw it out to you guys to decide what you would prefer. One was to do a feldspar vertical tasting where we would open some older vintages, and if you had older vintages, you could open those. And the other would be to do the Slate 5 versus the Feldspar 4, who are the same, those are the same vintage or mix of vintages, the same bottling time anyway, and see what would people rather do. So I think next week, we will talk about one of those things unless we get some other crazy idea. And our thought was, if you can either comment here or shoot us an email or post on Facebook or whatever, what people would like to do for that, we'll do one of those next week. And everything else, same time. We'll be doing the Facebook Zoom. It seems like the Zoom has worked better technically wise, which is great. We will, we'll plan to do this again next Sunday, and then next Saturday, we do those days in order. First Saturday comes, same. We will be doing our curbside pickup from 1 to 4, and we did have to have some staff help out because we had a ton of people come this week, which was fantastic. We stay outside of your car. You just pull up. We do everything on the iPad. We sign everything for you. It's sort of like as minimal interaction, and no touching and whatever. I mean, no like touching the same things. And we're trying to be super clean and take care of everybody, but make sure people get their food and their wine and all that. So 1 to 4 next Saturday, Facebook Live. Ed's got more answers.
One technology,
yes.
We're getting messages from Zoom only next week,
oh.
not Facebook Live.
Oh, okay. Got it.
Zoom only next week. Download Zoom. It's easy to do, and if you haven't done it yet, and it's a great little platform. And
I think the way it works is we need to send you the meeting link so that we don't get stray people sneaking in. And that will be, I'm seeing on here, Facebook did not work. Okay, so only Zoom. Zoom all the way. Zoom's getting all kinds of love on our update from the outside world. So if you are interested in joining us next week, and I hope you will, just email, it's just zoe@blackankle.com, ZOE, or you can email info, some way get hold of us and let us know, and we will send you the Zoom link for next week. I think this was much better. So, Facebook died every 3 minutes. So weird. Anyway. All right, there we go. Well, I'm glad we caught those of you who are on Zoom. And, you have something else? Somebody's dinner. Wait,
John Statler sent me the beautiful picture of that 2011 leaf stone with the lamb. 2011 leaf stone, fabulous.
I had a request for a knitting update. Here's the sweater. It's going to be down to my ankles. I'm almost ready to wear it next week. That's my challenge. I'll be wearing this sweater. It'll probably be 80 degrees. But I'm almost done. So for those of you, if you like to humor me with the knitting, I appreciate it. Somebody asked for an update. So I think we're good. Thank you guys all for joining us today. And we will see you next week. Take care of yourselves. All right.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks. Bye.